At 11:44 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Saturday night, Donald Trump posted something on Truth Social that set every energy market, every military command center, and every government in the Middle East on high alert simultaneously. He wrote in capital letters, the way he writes things, he means to be taken seriously, that if Iran does not fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. 48 hours. Power plants, starting with the biggest one first. The deadline expires at 7:44 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. As of this moment, that deadline is still running. Iran's response came within hours. The Iranian army issued a statement through state media. It said that any strike on Iran's energy facilities would prompt attacks on U.S. and Israeli energy and infrastructure assets in the region, specifically naming information technology systems and desalination facilities across the Gulf. Touch our power plants. Every Gulf pipeline burns. Two statements, one deadline. And somewhere between them, the most dangerous 48 hours of this entire war. Today, we are going to break down exactly what Trump is threatening, what Iran is threatening in response, what happens to 87 million Iranians and to the entire global energy system if either side follows through, and why this specific escalation, more than any missile exchange, more than any naval confrontation, more than anything that has happened in 22 days of war, may be the moment this conflict crosses a threshold it cannot come back from. Start with what Trump is actually threatening, because the words power plants cover an enormous range of possible targets, and the difference between them matters enormously. Iran operates approximately 110 natural gas power plants, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. It also has solar, hydro, wind, oil, diesel, coal, geothermal, and nuclear facilities. The country's electricity grid is sophisticated and deeply interconnected, a legacy of decades of investment that survived even the worst years of sanctions and economic pressure. The largest single power generation facility in Iran is almost certainly the Damavand combined cycle power plant, located approximately 70 kilometers southeast of downtown Tehran. Output 868 megawatts, enough electricity for millions of homes and a significant portion of Tehran's industrial base. The second largest is the Shahid Salimi plant in Mazandaran province near the Caspian Sea. 215 megawatts. Third is the Shahid Rajai plant, approximately 110 kilometers northeast of Tehran. 243 megawatts. For context, Florida's West County Energy Center, the largest operating natural gas power plant in the United States, produces 750 megawatts. Iran's biggest plant is roughly 3/4 of that capacity, serving a country of 87 million people. Trump did not specify which plant he meant as the biggest. He may have been referring to Damavand. He may have been referring to Bushehr, the nuclear power plant on the Persian Gulf coast, already struck last week, which at around 10 megawatts is not technically the largest, but carries enormous symbolic and radiological significance. His threat was deliberately vague on specifics and precisely clear on intent. Hit and obliterate, starting with the biggest one first. Now, here is what that actually means for 87 million Iranians, because this is the dimension of this threat that has received almost no attention in the coverage of the past 12 hours. Iran's electricity grid is not a luxury. It is the infrastructure that keeps a modern society alive. Hospitals run on it, water treatment plants run on it, sewage systems run on it, food refrigeration and supply chains depend on it. Communications networks, including the military communications that the IRGC uses to coordinate its operations, run on it. Destroying Iran's largest power plants does not just turn off lights, it sets off a cascade. Without electricity, water treatment stops. Without water treatment, drinking water becomes unsafe within days in major urban centers. Without electricity, hospitals cannot operate critical care equipment. Without electricity, food supply chains collapse because refrigeration stops working across the entire distribution network. Without electricity, the winter heating systems that millions of Iranians depend on in a country that experiences temperatures well below freezing in its northern and central regions stop functioning. The International Committee of the Red Cross has published detailed analysis of what happens when electricity infrastructure is destroyed in a densely populated country. They call it the reverberating effects of attacks on electrical infrastructure. Their findings based on what happened in Iraq after 1991, in Yugoslavia after 1999, in Lebanon in 2006 are consistent and alarming. The immediate military effect of destroying a power plant is limited. The humanitarian effect on the civilian population that depends on that grid is catastrophic and long-lasting. 87 million people, two of the largest power plants on their grid, obliterated. In a country that is already under a sustained military campaign that has killed over 2,000 people and displaced millions. The word obliterate was chosen carefully. Obliterate does not mean damage or degrade or reduce capacity. It means remove from existence. Trump is not threatening to inconvenience Iran's electricity supply. He is threatening to eliminate the infrastructure that keeps the civilian population alive. Iran's response is equally specific and equally deliberate. And it deserves exactly the same level of careful analysis. The Iranian army statement named two specific categories of target energy infrastructure and desalination facilities belonging to the US and its allies in the region. Desalination facilities are not incidental infrastructure in the Gulf states. They are existential infrastructure. The United Arab Emirates gets approximately 42% of its fresh water from desalination. Saudi Arabia gets approximately 70%. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, all of them are heavily dependent on desalination for their basic water supply. The Persian Gulf's natural freshwater resources are essentially non-existent. Without desalination plants running continuously, these countries cannot sustain their populations. Iran is saying, if you destroy what keeps our people alive, we will destroy what keeps the Gulf populations alive. That is not a metaphor. It is a military threat against civilian water infrastructure that directly mirrors the humanitarian logic of Trump's power plant threat. And energy infrastructure in the Gulf means something specific too. Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq facility, which processes approximately 7% of global daily oil supply, was already on Iran's target list before this war began. The East-West pipeline, the Ras Tanura export terminal, the largest crude oil loading facility in the world, the UAE's oil terminals at Fujairah, already struck twice in this war, Qatar's remaining LNG infrastructure at Ras Laffan, what was not already destroyed. Iran is describing, in the most formal military language it has available, a scenario where it systematically destroys the energy export infrastructure of every Gulf state that hosts American forces. Not selectively, comprehensively. Now, look at the context in which this ultimatum was delivered, because the timing tells you something crucial about what is actually happening inside the Trump administration right now. On Friday, less than 24 hours before the 48-hour ultimatum, Trump posted on Truth Social that the U.S. is getting very close to meeting our objectives as we consider winding down our great military efforts in the Middle East. Winding down. Those were his exact words. Friday night, winding down. Then Saturday night, 24 hours later, obliterate the biggest power plant first. 48 hours. Or else, Al Jazeera's correspondent in Washington noted the specific contradiction directly. He said there seemed to be a gap between what the White House appears to want in the Strait of Hormuz and what the U.S. military says they have already accomplished. He called it interesting, at the very least, to hear Trump talking about a major escalation, given what we have been hearing throughout the course of the day about how much damage the U.S. has supposedly done to Iran's ability to target oil tankers. That gap between the military saying we have degraded Iran's ability to threaten the Strait and the president saying we will obliterate power plants if the Strait is not open is not a communications problem. It is a strategic coherence problem. If the military's assessment is correct that Iran's ability to threaten shipping in the Strait has been significantly degraded, then the pressure on Iran to comply with a 48-hour ultimatum is based on capability that may no longer exist. Iran may have already lost much of the military infrastructure that was keeping Hormuz closed. Opening the Strait now might simply reflect that reality rather than compliance with Trump's ultimatum. But if that is true, if the Strait is opening because Iran's capability has been degraded rather than because Iran decided to comply, then Trump cannot credibly claim his ultimatum worked. And if he cannot claim it worked, the political logic of escalating to power plants disappears. The timing of the ultimatum, one day after talking about winding down on a Saturday night from Mar-a-Lago, has the feel of a decision made without full coordination with the military command that is executing this war. Here is the strategic calculation that every serious analyst is now doing this morning. If Trump follows through on Monday at 7:44 p.m. Eastern Time, and power plants are struck, assuming Iran has not complied, three things happen simultaneously. Iran executes its counter threat. Gulf energy and desalination infrastructure goes under sustained attack. Saudi Arabia's oil terminals, UAE's water supply, Qatar's remaining LNG capacity. The energy market, already in crisis at 112 a barrel, faces a second shock of potentially historic severity. Goldman Sachs' worst case scenario of 147.5 oil stops being a risk scenario and becomes the base case. The humanitarian catastrophe inside Iran, already severe, after 22 days of bombing, enters a category that international law has specific language for. The 1,977 additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions explicitly prohibit attacks on objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. Power plants that provide electricity for water treatment, hospitals, and heating for 87 million people fall directly within that category. Every international human rights organization on earth would immediately and loudly describe what happened in those terms. The diplomatic isolation America has already experienced, Switzerland blocking weapons exports, NATO refusing to participate, Europe calling the war not theirs, would deepen dramatically. And China. China gets 40% of its oil through Hormuz. China has been watching this war carefully from the sidelines, calculating its interests, maintaining its neutrality. A strike on Iranian power plants that triggers an Iranian strike on Gulf energy infrastructure that sends oil to 150 and threatens the energy security of 1 billion Chinese people. That is the scenario in which China's calculation about staying on the sidelines changes most dramatically. But here is the scenario if Trump does not follow through. If Monday comes and Iran has not complied and the power plants remain standing, Every red line Trump has drawn in this war, open Hormuz in 48 hours, stop attacking the Gulf, stop targeting American bases, has been stated, restated, and then either quietly abandoned or retroactively redefined when Iran did not comply. An ultimatum that expires without consequence is not just a failed threat, it is information. It tells Iran and every country watching exactly how seriously to take the next ultimatum. It tells the Gulf states, whose protection depends on American credibility, that the security umbrella they are depending on has limits that can be probed and found. It tells China, Russia, and everyone else calculating how far they can push in their own theaters that America's stated red lines may not be the actual red lines. Trump has said things in this war that did not happen. He said it would last 2 weeks. He said Iran was totally defeated. He said prices would drop like a rock. He said winding down, and now 48 hours, obliterate, starting with the biggest one first. The 48 hours is running. Iran has not complied. Iranian missiles struck Dimona and Arad on Saturday, the first time Iranian missiles penetrated Israel's air defense systems in the Negev, injuring 64 people and shattering apartment buildings near Israel's main nuclear research center. Iran targeted Diego Garcia, the joint UK-US base in the Indian Ocean, with what Israel's military described as a two-stage intercontinental ballistic missile, the first ICBM range weapon used in this entire conflict. The war is not winding down. It is entering its most dangerous phase. The deadline is Monday at 7:44 p.m. Eastern Time. And the world is watching to see whether the obliteration is real or whether it is the latest in a series of statements that dissolve into the fog of a war that was supposed to be over 3 weeks ago.